Victoria Sterling gripped the handlebars of her delivery bike as she weaved through the crowded streets of downtown Manhattan. Her dark hair whipped behind her in the morning breeze, and her determined brown eyes focused on the imposing glass tower ahead. Cross Industries headquarters stretched 47 floors into the cloudy sky, its chrome and steel facade reflecting the bustling city below. She checked her phone for the third time in 2 minutes. 11:47 a.m. The lunch order was supposed to arrive at noon sharp. The customer had specifically requested punctuality. Victoria couldn't afford another complaint on her delivery record, not when she was already walking on thin ice with her supervisor. The revolving door of Cross Industries spun slowly as she approached, balancing 3 bags of steaming Thai food in one hand while maneuvering her delivery bag with the other. The lobby opened before her like a scene from a luxury magazine. Polished marble floors stretched endlessly, reflecting the warm golden light from crystal chandeliers. Modern art pieces hung on cream-colored walls, and the subtle sound of a water fountain provided an elegant backdrop to the soft murmur of business conversations. Victoria felt immediately out of place in her faded jeans and delivery company t-shirt. Her worn sneakers squeaked slightly against the pristine marble as she hurried toward the reception desk, where a perfectly groomed woman in a navy blazer typed efficiently on her computer. "Delivery for Sebastian Cross," Victoria announced. Slightly out of breath from her rush up the front steps, the receptionist looked up with practiced politeness. "Mr. Cross is expecting you. Executive elevator, 47th floor. His assistant will meet you there." Victoria nodded her thanks and hurried toward the bank of elevators. The executive elevator stood apart from the others, its brass doors gleaming like gold. As she waited, she couldn't help but admire the view through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread out below like a living map, with tiny cars crawling along the streets and people moving like ants between the buildings. The elevator arrived with a soft ding, and Victoria stepped inside, pressing the button for the 47th floor. As the elevator climbed, she practiced her professional delivery speech in her head. "Good afternoon, Mr. Cross. I have your lunch order from Bangkok Garden. That'll be $47.32, please." The unexpected encounter. The elevator doors opened to reveal another world entirely. The executive floor featured rich hardwood floors, tasteful artwork, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city. A hallway stretched in both directions, lined with offices whose doors bore gold nameplates. Victoria checked the piece of paper in her pocket. "Sebastian Cross, corner office, suite 4701. She turned left and walked down the carpeted hallway, her footsteps muffled by the thick Persian runner that stretched the length of the corridor. As she rounded the corner toward the corner office, a blur of golden fur and wagging tails suddenly appeared in her path. A beautiful golden retriever wearing a service dog vest had somehow gotten loose from its owner and was bounding joyfully down the hallway, its leash trailing behind. "Careful," a woman's voice shouted from somewhere behind her. "Duke got away from me!" Victoria tried to sidestep the enthusiastic dog, but her delivery bags threw off her balance. Her left foot caught on the trailing leash just as Duke decided to change direction. Time seemed to slow as Victoria felt herself falling forward, the bags of Thai food flying through the air in graceful arcs. She braced herself for impact with the hardwood floor, but instead found herself colliding with something much warmer and more solid. Strong arms wrapped around her instinctively, catching her mid-fall and pulling her against a broad chest that smelled faintly of expensive cologne and fresh coffee. Victoria looked up to find herself staring into the most striking pair of green eyes she had ever seen. They were the color of deep forest pools, framed by dark lashes and set in a face that belonged on magazine covers. The man holding her had dark hair with just a touch of silver at the temples, high cheekbones, and a jawline that could have been carved by Renaissance masters. For a moment, neither of them moved. Victoria became acutely aware of every detail: the warmth of his hands on her back, the way his white dress shirt felt beneath her palms where she had instinctively reached out to steady herself, and the fact that his green eyes seemed to be studying her face with the same intensity she was studying his. "I'm so sorry," she managed to whisper, though she made no immediate move to step away from his embrace. "Don't be," he replied, his voice deep and warm with just a hint of amusement. "I can't remember the last time someone literally fell into my life. It was then that they both became aware of the chaos surrounding them. Pad Thai noodles decorated the pristine hallway like abstract art. Spring rolls had scattered across the hardwood floor, and a container of green curry had somehow managed to splatter the opposite wall in an impressive Jackson Pollock-style pattern. Victoria's face flushed crimson as the reality of the situation hit her. She had just destroyed the executive floor of one of Manhattan's most prestigious companies, and she was still standing in the arms of a man who was undoubtedly about to have her arrested for assault and property damage. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," she muttered, finally stepping back from his embrace. "This is a disaster. I'm so dead. My boss is going to kill me, and then your security team is going to arrest my corpse." The man's lips curved into a smile that transformed his entire face. "Breathe," he said gently. "It's just food. The cleaning crew has dealt with much worse." "Just food?" Victoria gestured wildly at the carnage around them. "I've turned your beautiful hallway into a Thai restaurant explosion. And I still don't know where Mr. Cross's office is, and his lunch is now decorating your walls instead of feeding him." The green-eyed stranger tilted his head slightly, that amused smile growing wider. "And what makes you think I'm not Mr. Cross?" Victoria's mouth fell open as her brain processed this information. The expensive suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The confident way he carried himself. The fact that he was on the executive floor at noon on a Wednesday, clearly comfortable in his surroundings. "You're Sebastian Cross," she said, though it came out more as a question than a statement. "Guilty as charged." He extended a hand that was somehow both elegant and strong. "And you are?" "Victoria Sterling," she replied automatically, shaking his hand and immediately regretting how clammy her palm must feel. "Professional food delivery disaster specialist, apparently." Sebastian laughed, a rich sound that seemed to fill the hallway. With warmth, while Victoria Sterling in 32 years of living, I can honestly say that no one has ever made quite such a memorable first impression. The cleanup, the woman who had shouted the warning earlier, appeared around the corner, having finally caught up with Duke. She was an elegant woman in her 50s, wearing a tailored cream-colored suit and a look of mortification that rivaled Victoria's own. "Mr. Cross, I am so incredibly sorry," she said, clipping Duke's leash back onto his collar. "He's usually so well behaved, but something spooked him in the lobby, and he took off running. I tried to catch him, but these heels weren't made for sprinting." "It's perfectly fine, Margaret," Sebastian assured her. "Accidents happen. Is everything all right with you and Duke?" Margaret nodded, her relief evident. "We're both fine, thank you. But I feel terrible about the mess and the trouble we've caused this young woman." Victoria was still staring at Sebastian, trying to reconcile the image she'd had in her mind of a tech billionaire with the warm, understanding man standing before her. She'd expected someone cold and intimidating, perhaps angry about the destruction of his executive floor. Instead, he seemed genuinely concerned about everyone's well-being and almost amused by the chaos. "Don't worry about it," Sebastian told Margaret. "Duke was just trying to make friends. Victoria here was an innocent victim of his enthusiasm." Margaret smiled gratefully and headed back toward the elevators with Duke trotting obediently beside her. Victoria watched them go, then turned back to Sebastian with fresh mortification. "Your lunch," she said weakly, gesturing at the scattered remains of the Thai food order. "I've completely ruined your lunch, and I don't have money to replace it, and my company is probably going to fire me, and I still owe them for the food that's now abstract art on your floor." Sebastian studied her face, noting the genuine distress in her brown eyes and the way she was unconsciously twisting the delivery bag strapped between her fingers. There was something refreshingly real about her reaction, so different from the calculated responses he usually encountered in his business world. "Tell me something, Victoria," he said, loosening his tie slightly and rolling up his shirt sleeves as if preparing for manual labor. "Do you have another delivery after this one?" "No, this was my last one for the lunch shift. But I have to get back and explain to my supervisor what happened and probably clean out my locker." Sebastian nodded thoughtfully, then did something that surprised them both. He knelt down and began picking up the scattered spring rolls, placing them in one of the torn delivery bags. "What are you doing?" Victoria asked, immediately dropping to her knees to help, despite her confusion. "Cleaning up," he replied, matter-of-factly. "This is partly Duke's fault, and I can't let you face this alone." Victoria stared at him in disbelief. You're a billionaire CEO, and you're crawling around on your office floor picking up spring rolls. I'm a person who believes in taking responsibility for situations I'm involved in, he corrected gently. And right now, I'm involved in this situation. They worked together in comfortable silence, gathering the scattered food and trying to salvage what they could. Victoria found herself stealing glances at Sebastian as they cleaned, noting the way his dark hair fell across his forehead when he leaned forward, and how his expensive shirt stretched across his broad shoulders as he reached for a wayward piece of broccoli. You know, Sebastian said as they stood up with their collection of food debris, I wasn't really that hungry anyway. I usually just order lunch out of habit, then eat maybe half of it while working through meetings. Victoria looked at him skeptically. You order $47 worth of Thai food as a habit? Point taken. He smiled that transformative smile again. But the truth is, I was planning to eat alone at my desk while reviewing quarterly reports. This is actually much more interesting. The proposition as they finished cleaning. Sebastian's assistant David Kim appeared around the corner, his usual composed demeanor faltering slightly at the sight of his normally immaculate boss holding a bag of food debris. Mr. Cross, David said carefully, your 2 o'clock appointment moved up their arrival time. They're waiting in conference room A. Sebastian nodded, then looked at Victoria with an expression she couldn't quite read. David, could you please call Bangkok Garden and have them prepare another lunch order? Same items as before, but have it delivered to conference room A in about 20 minutes. Of course, sir, and David. Put the cost of both orders on my personal account, not the company expense account. After David left, Sebastian turned back to Victoria with that same unreadable expression. Walk with me to my office for a moment. Victoria followed him down the hallway, trying not to notice how perfectly his charcoal gray suit fit his tall frame, or how confidently he moved through his domain. His corner office was exactly what she'd expected, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic city views. A massive mahogany desk that probably cost more than her annual salary, and tasteful modern furniture arranged in conversation areas. But what surprised her were the personal touches. Family photos on the credenza, showing Sebastian with an older couple who were clearly his parents, and several shots of him at charity events. Building homes with Habitat for Humanity, and coaching what looked like a youth basketball team. Guitar stood in one corner, and several well-worn books were scattered across a side table. You play guitar? Victoria observed, her nervous energy making her state the obvious. Badly, Sebastian admitted, moving to stand by the windows. It's my way of unwinding after difficult days. Well, though I suspect the cleaning crew wishes I'd take up silent meditation instead. Victoria found herself smiling despite her lingering. Mortification. I play piano. Also badly, according to my neighbors. Sebastian turned from the window and Victoria felt that same electric awareness she'd experienced when he'd caught her in the hallway. There was something happening between them. Something that felt both exciting and terrifying. Victoria, he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. I want to make you an offer. Her heart rate immediately spiked. An offer? I have a charity gala this Saturday night. It's for children's literacy, a cause that's very important. To me, I need a date. Victoria blinked in confusion. I'm sorry, what? Sebastian moved closer, and Victoria caught another hint of his cologne. Something sophisticated and masculine that made her want to step closer rather than away. I'm asking if you'd like to accompany me to the gala, he said simply, as my guest. At Victoria's mind reeled. You want me to be your date to a charity gala? Me? The woman who just destroyed your hallway with Thai food? Especially because you're the woman who just destroyed my hallway with Thai food, he replied, his green eyes twinkling with mischief. You're genuine, Victoria. In my world, that's rarer than you might think. Victoria stared at him, trying to process the surreal turn her day had taken. This morning, she'd been worried about making her delivery quota and paying her portion of the rent. Now a billionaire was asking her to a charity gala. I don't have anything to wear to a charity gala, she said, though she wasn't sure if she was making an excuse or just stating a fact. That can be arranged. I don't know how to behave at fancy events. You know how to be yourself? Victoria looked into his earnest green eyes and felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening that she hadn't even realized was closed. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything? This isn't some kind of elaborate revenge plan. For the Thai food incident, is it? Like you're not going to humiliate me in front of all your rich friends? Sebastian's expression grew serious, and he stepped close enough that Victoria had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Victoria Sterling," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I give you my word that I would never do anything to hurt or embarrass you, ever." The intensity in his voice made Victoria's pulse quicken. There was something in his eyes that spoke of loneliness, despite his success and wealth. Something that recognized the same quality in her own life. "Okay," she heard herself saying, "I'll go to your gala." Sebastian's smile was brilliant, transforming his handsome features into something that took Victoria's breath away. "Saturday night, 7 o'clock, he said, pulling a business card from his jacket pocket and writing something on the back. "This is my personal number. Call me Friday evening, and we'll work out the details." Victoria took the card, her fingers brushing his briefly and sending little sparks up her arm. She looked down at the elegant script that spelled out his name and title, then flipped it over to see a phone number written in strong, confident handwriting as she prepared to leave. Sebastian caught her hand gently. "Victoria," he said, his voice soft. "Thank you for what? Destroying your hallway?" "For saying yes," he replied simply. "And for reminding me that the most interesting things in life are usually the ones we never see coming." Victoria left Cross Industries in a daze, Sebastian's business card clutched in her hand and her mind spinning with the impossibility of what had just happened. As she walked back to her delivery bike, she couldn't shake the feeling that her entire life just changed direction in the span of 30 minutes. Little did she know that 47 floors above her, Sebastian Cross stood at his office window, watching her navigate through traffic, smile on his face, and the strangest feeling that he'd just met the woman who was going to turn his carefully ordered world completely upside down. And for the first time in years, that prospect didn't terrify him. It thrilled him. Friday evening arrived faster than Victoria had expected, bringing with it a mixture of excitement and pure terror that made her pace around her small apartment like a caged animal. She had called Sebastian as promised, and their conversation had been surprisingly easy and natural. He'd arranged for a personal stylist to visit her apartment, along with a selection of gowns from an upscale boutique. Natalie Chen sat cross-legged on Victoria's bed, watching the chaos unfold, with barely contained amusement. Victoria's best friend and roommate had just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital, but her energy seemed boundless as she supervised the transformation process. "I still can't believe this is happening," Victoria muttered, holding up a midnight blue gown against her reflection. "3 days ago I was delivering pad thai, and now I'm going to a charity gala with a billionaire." "Believe it," Natalie said, grinning. "And stop second-guessing yourself. You deserve this." The stylist, a petite woman named Carmen with an eye for elegance, had brought 3 gowns for Victoria to choose from. The midnight blue was sophisticated and classic. The emerald green was bold and eye-catching. It was the third option. That took Victoria's breath away. The dress was a deep burgundy that seemed to shimmer between wine and gold depending on how the light caught it. The fabric flowed like liquid silk, with a fitted bodice that accentuated Victoria's curves and a skirt that moved like poetry when she walked. The neckline was elegant without being revealing, and the color brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. "That's the one," Carmen declared the moment Victoria emerged from her bedroom wearing it. "Absolutely perfect." Victoria looked at herself in the full-length mirror and hardly recognized the woman staring back. The dress transformed her. From a struggling delivery driver into someone who belonged in Sebastian's world, at least on the surface. Sebastian arrived at 7 o'clock precisely, looking devastating in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. When Victoria opened her apartment door and saw him standing there with a small bouquet of white roses, she felt her heart skip several beats. "You look incredible," he said softly, his green eyes taking in every detail of her appearance with obvious appreciation. "Thank you," Victoria managed, accepting the roses and breathing in their delicate fragrance. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Drive to the gala took them through the most elegant part of the city, past brownstones with perfectly manicured gardens and tree-lined streets, where every car looked like it belonged in a luxury magazine. Sebastian's driver navigated smoothly through the evening traffic while Sebastian and Victoria sat in comfortable conversation in the back seat. "Nervous?" Sebastian asked, noting how Victoria's fingers fidgeted with her small clutch purse. "Terrified," she admitted honestly. I've never been to anything like this before. Sebastian reached over and covered her hand with his, the simple contact sending warmth up her arm. Just be yourself, Victoria. That's all anyone could ask for. The venue for the charity gala was a historic mansion that had been converted into an event space. Its grand ballroom filled with crystal chandeliers, elegant floral arrangements, and the soft murmur of refined conversation. Women in designer gowns moved gracefully between groups of men in expensive tuxedos. While waiters circulated with champagne flutes and elaborate hors d'oeuvres, Victoria felt immediately overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding her. Everything, from the marble columns to the gold-framed artwork, spoke of wealth and privilege that was completely foreign to her world. Sebastian seemed to sense her discomfort and kept a protective hand on the small of her back as they moved through the crowd. He introduced her to various business associates and socialites, always with genuine warmth and never making her feel like an accessory or afterthought. Sebastian, darling? A woman's voice cut through the ambient conversation like a blade. Victoria turned to see an elegant woman in her 60s approaching them, her silver hair perfectly coiffed and her black gown dripping with diamonds. Mother, Sebastian replied, and Victoria caught the slight tension in his voice. I'd like you to meet Victoria Sterling. Victoria, this is my mother, Catherine Cross. Catherine's pale blue eyes assessed Victoria with the precision of a jeweler, evaluating a questionable diamond. Her smile was polite but cold, the kind of expression that said she was already finding Victoria lacking in some indefinable way. How lovely to meet you, dear, Catherine said, extending a gloved hand that felt like touching ice. And how did you and Sebastian meet? Victoria felt Sebastian's hand tighten slightly on her back, a silent message of support. Actually, Mrs. Cross, I quite literally fell into his arms during a food delivery. It was either the most embarrassing moment of my life or the most serendipitous, depending on how you look at it. Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly, and Victoria couldn't tell if the older woman was amused or appalled. How unique. And what is it that you do, Victoria? Besides food delivery? The question was clearly meant to highlight the class differences between them, but Victoria refused to be intimidated. I'm working on opening my own cafe eventually. Right now I'm saving money and learning the business from the ground up. How admirable, Catherine replied, though her tone suggested she found it anything but admirable. Sebastian has always been drawn to charity cases. The insult hit its mark, and Victoria felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. But before she could respond, Sebastian stepped closer to her side, his voice taking on an edge Victoria had never heard before. Mother, Victoria is my guest and deserves to be treated with respect. If you can't manage that, perhaps we should continue this conversation another time. Catherine's eyes widened slightly at her son's rebuke, but she recovered quickly. Of course, darling, I meant no offense. She turned back to Victoria with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I do hope you enjoy the evening, dear. As Catherine glided away to torture some other unsuspecting guest, Victoria felt a mixture of hurt and gratitude swirling in her chest. I'm sorry about that, Sebastian said quietly. My mother can be challenging. She thinks I'm not good enough. For you, Victoria replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Sebastian turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face gently. Victoria, listen to me. You are more than good enough. You're remarkable. My mother's opinion doesn't change that. The sincerity in his voice made Victoria's heart flutter. But before she could respond, they were interrupted by a tall man with sandy brown hair and an easy smile. Sebastian, you've been hiding from me all evening, the newcomer said, clapping Sebastian on the shoulder. And I can see why. You must be Victoria. I'm James Patterson, Sebastian's business partner, and the friend who keeps him somewhat grounded. Victoria liked James immediately. His handshake was warm and genuine, and his eyes held none of the calculating assessment she'd seen from Catherine. James tells everyone he's the brains of our operation, Sebastian said with mock seriousness. I let him believe it because it's easier than arguing. Someone has to keep your ego in check, James replied with a grin. Victoria, has he told you about the time he tried to impress a potential investor by cooking dinner himself and nearly burned down his kitchen? I was not trying to impress her, Sebastian protested. But Victoria could see he was enjoying the good-natured ribbing from his friend. As the evening progressed, the Victoria found herself relaxing despite the intimidating surroundings. Sebastian never left her side, introducing her to interesting people and making sure she felt included in every conversation. She met the director of the Literacy Foundation, a passionate woman who spoke eloquently about the importance of reading programs in underserved communities. She chatted with a famous author who turned out to be surprisingly down-to-earth and funny, but it was during the silent auction portion of the evening that Victoria truly saw Sebastian's character shine through. She watched him bid generously on various items, not seeming to care about winning them, but clearly wanting to support the cause. When a young girl who was part of the literacy program got up to speak about how the foundation had changed her life, Victoria noticed tears in Sebastian's eyes. "You really care about this?" she whispered to him during the applause. "Education saved my life," he replied quietly. "My family didn't have money when I was growing up. The scholarship program gave me opportunities I never would have had otherwise. This foundation does the same thing for kids who need it most." Victoria felt something shift in her chest as she looked at this man who had everything but still remembered where he came from. This wasn't just a wealthy businessman playing at charity for tax benefits. This was someone who genuinely cared about making a difference. The confession later that evening, Sebastian suggested they step outside for some fresh air. The mansion's gardens were illuminated by soft lights strung through the trees, creating a magical atmosphere that felt like something from a fairy tale. They walked slowly along a gravel path that wound between carefully manicured flower beds, the sounds of the gala fading to a pleasant murmur behind them. "Thank you for tonight," Victoria said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "This whole experience has been incredible." "Thank you for saying yes," Sebastian replied, stopping beside a fountain where water cascaded over carved marble figures. "Victoria, I need to tell you something." Something in his tone made Victoria's pulse quicken. "What is it?" Sebastian turned to face her, and in the soft garden lighting, his green eyes seemed to glow with intensity. "This wasn't supposed to happen. What wasn't supposed to happen? This," he gestured between them. "The way I feel when I'm with you." Victoria's breath caught in her throat. "How do you feel when you're with me?" Sebastian stepped closer. Close enough that Victoria had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Like I've been sleepwalking through my life and you've finally woken me up? Like all the success and money and recognition don't mean anything if I don't have someone real to share it with." Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. "Sebastian, I know we've only known each other for a few days," he continued, his voice growing more urgent. "I know this sounds crazy, but I can't stop thinking about you. Your laugh, the way you bite your lip when you're nervous, how you're not afraid to call me out when I'm being ridiculous." "You're not being ridiculous," Victoria whispered. Sebastian's hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Victoria Sterling, you have completely turned my world upside down, and I don't want it to go back to the way it was before." Before Victoria could respond, Sebastian leaned down and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might pull away. But when Victoria's arms came up to wrap around his neck, the kiss deepened into something that made her forget about everything else in the world except the man holding her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Victoria looked up at Sebastian's face, seeing her own wonder and confusion reflected in his expression. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Sebastian smiled, that transformative expression that made her heart race. "Now we figure it out together." Victoria woke up in her own bed the next morning with the distinct feeling that the previous evening had been an elaborate dream. But the burgundy gown hanging in her closet and Sebastian's business card on her nightstand proved that it had all been gloriously real. Her phone buzzed with a text message that made her heart skip. "Good morning, beautiful. Thank you for the most perfect evening. Coffee later." She was still smiling at the message when Natalie burst through her bedroom door carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing scrubs that indicated she was heading to another long shift at the hospital. "Spill everything," Natalie demanded, settling cross-legged on the bed. "And I mean everything. Start with the dress and end with whatever put that dreamy expression on your face." Victoria found herself telling Natalie about every detail of the evening. From Catherine's thinly veiled insults to the magical kiss in the garden, her best friend listened with growing excitement, occasionally interrupting with questions or exclamations of delight. "Vic, This is like something out of a romance novel, Natalie said, when Victoria finished her recap. A real-life fairy tale. But that's just it, Victoria replied, her earlier euphoria beginning to dim. Fairy tales aren't real life. Sebastian and I live in completely different worlds. Last night was amazing, but what happens when reality sets in? Natalie studied her friend's face with the perceptive eye of someone who'd known Victoria since college. You're scared, terrified, Victoria admitted. What if this is just some kind of phase for him? What if he gets bored with the novelty of dating someone from outside his social circle? What if I'm just his charity case like his mother implied? Before Natalie could respond, Victoria's phone rang. Sebastian's name appeared on the screen and Victoria felt her pulse quicken just seeing it. Good morning, she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. Good morning, beautiful. Sebastian's warm voice came through the phone, and Victoria could hear the smile in his tone. I hope I didn't wake you. Not at all, I was just having coffee with Natalie. Perfect timing then. I was wondering if you'd like to spend the day with me. I have something I'd like to show you. Victoria felt her anxiety spike. What kind of something? It's a surprise, trust me. The simple question carried so much weight. Trust him with her day. Trust him with her heart. Trust him not to hurt her when the fairy tale inevitably ended.
Abby.
Kay. She heard herself saying, I trust you. The secret project. An hour later, Sebastian picked Victoria up in a different car than the night before. This one was still expensive, but more understated. A sleek silver sedan that didn't scream wealth. Quite as loudly as the previous evening's luxury vehicle? Where are we going? Victoria asked as they drove through parts of the city she didn't recognize. Somewhere that means a lot to me, Sebastian replied mysteriously. Somewhere I've never taken anyone else before. They ended up in a neighborhood that was clearly undergoing renovation. Old buildings stood next to new construction sites, and signs of gentrification were everywhere. Sebastian parked in front of a large brick building that looked like it had once been a factory or warehouse. This is it, he announced, getting out of the car and coming around to open Victoria's door. Victoria looked up at the imposing brick facade with confusion.
Oh, what is it?
Sebastian's eyes lit up with excitement as he produced a set of keys from his pocket. Come inside and see. The interior of the building was a work in progress, with construction materials scattered around and the skeleton of what would eventually become interior walls. But even in its unfinished state, Victoria could see the potential. High ceilings, with exposed beams, enormous windows that let in streams of natural light, and enough space to house almost anything imaginable. I don't understand, Victoria said. Turning in a slow circle to take in the vast space, Sebastian moved to stand beside her, his hands shoved deep in his pockets in a gesture that seemed almost nervous. This is going to be a community center. Literacy programs, job training, after-school activities for kids, computer classes for adults. Everything this neighborhood needs but doesn't have access to. Victoria felt her heart swell as she looked around the space with new eyes. Sebastian, this is incredible. When will it open? That depends, he said, and something in his voice made Victoria turn to face him fully. Depends on what? Sebastian pulled his hands from his pockets, and Victoria saw that he was holding a folder thick with papers. On whether I can convince the right person to help me run it. Victoria's breath caught as understanding began to dawn. Sebastian ... I've been planning this project for 2 years, he continued, his words coming faster now as if he was afraid he might lose his courage. But I never could figure out who should manage the day-to-day operations. Someone who understands what this community needs. Someone who's lived the struggles that these programs are meant to address. Someone with the heart and intelligence to make this place everything it could be. He handed her the folder, and Victoria opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were architectural plans, budget projections, program proposals, and detailed job descriptions. But it was the last page that made tears spring to her eyes. Victoria Sterling, Community Center Director, she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. The salary is more than competitive, Sebastian said, his voice gentle. Full benefits, education allowance if you want to pursue additional training, and complete autonomy to run the programs however you think best. Victoria looked up from the papers to find Sebastian watching her with an expression of hope and vulnerability that took her breath away. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to make a real difference in people's lives, he corrected. I'm offering you the opportunity to use your talents and your heart to build something meaningful. Victoria felt tears sliding down her cheeks as she looked around the space again, imagining it filled with children learning to read, adults gaining new skills, families finding community and support. But there's something else, Sebastian continued, moving closer to her. Something more important than any job offer. What? Sebastian reached out and gently took her hands, the folder forgotten between them. I'm offering you my heart, Victoria, completely and unconditionally. I know it's fast. I know it seems impossible, but I love you. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. You love me? I love your laugh and your stubbornness, and the way you're not intimidated by anyone, including my mother. I love how you see the best in people, and how you're not afraid to work hard for what you want. I love that you challenged everything I thought I knew about what I wanted in life. Victoria stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it echoing in the empty space around them. Sebastian, she whispered, I love you too. The smile that spread across his face was radiant, transforming his handsome features into something that made Victoria's knees weak. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that left them both breathless. The challenge, their perfect moment, was interrupted by the sound of slow, mocking applause echoing through the empty building. Victoria and Sebastian broke apart to see a man in an expensive suit standing in the doorway, his expression cold and calculating. How touching, the stranger said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. The billionaire prince and his charity project princess? Sebastian's entire posture changed, his body going rigid with tension. Jonathan, what are you doing here? Jonathan Wells stepped further into the building, his cold eyes taking in every detail of the construction around them. I heard through certain channels that you were planning another one of your do-gooder projects. I thought I'd come see for myself. Victoria felt Sebastian's hand tighten protectively around hers, and she sensed that this Jonathan Wells represented some kind of threat, though she couldn't understand what it might be. This doesn't concern you, Sebastian said, his voice carefully controlled. Oh, but it does, Jonathan replied with a smile that never reached his eyes. You see, I've been watching your little romance with great interest. The delivery girl who captured the heart of Manhattan's most eligible bachelor, it's quite the fairy tale. Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could respond, Jonathan continued. Of course, fairy tales rarely survive contact with reality. Tell me, Miss Sterling, are you aware that your Prince Charming here has a habit of rescuing damsels in distress? Jonathan, stop, Sebastian warned, but the other man ignored him. There was the struggling actress 3 years ago, the single mother he helped get back on her feet 2 years ago, the artist whose gallery showing he funded 18 months ago. All beautiful women, all in need of saving, all eventually discarded. When the novelty wore off, Victoria felt the words hit her like physical blows. She looked at Sebastian, searching his face for some sign that Jonathan was lying. But what she saw there was guilt and resignation. Is it true? She asked quietly. Sebastian's silence was answer enough. The community center is real, he said. Finally, his voice heavy with regret. The job offer is real. My feelings for you are real. But I'm not the first woman you've tried to save, Victoria finished, her heart breaking with each word. No, Sebastian admitted, his green eyes filled with pain. But Victoria, you have to believe me when I tell you that none of them were like you. None of them made me feel the way you do. Jonathan's laugh was harsh and ugly. The same thing you told all of them, I'm sure. Long do you think this one will last, Sebastian? 6 months? A year if she's particularly entertaining? Victoria felt sick to her stomach. Everything she'd worried about, every fear she'd tried to push aside, was coming true. She wasn't special. She was just the latest in a series of charity cases that Sebastian collected and eventually discarded. I have to go, she whispered, dropping the folder and watching the papers scatter across the dusty floor. Victoria, wait, Sebastian called. After her, but she was already walking toward the door, her steps quick and desperate. Let her go, she heard Jonathan say behind her. You'll find another project soon enough. You always do. The realization, Victoria spent the next week in a haze of heartbreak and humiliation. She threw herself into her delivery work with renewed determination, trying to lose herself in the familiar rhythm of rushing through traffic and climbing stairs. But every expensive car she saw reminded her of Sebastian, every glimpse of a man, in a business suit made her heart lurch painfully. Natalie tried to comfort her, bringing home Chinese takeout and wine, listening patiently as Victoria alternated between rage and despair. "Maybe you should talk to him," Natalie suggested one evening as they sat on their couch sharing a container of lo mein. "Get his side of the story. What's there to talk about?" Victoria replied bitterly. "I was an idiot, actually thought. A billionaire could fall in love with someone like me, someone like you." Natalie's voice sharpened. "What exactly does that mean?" Victoria gestured vaguely at their modest apartment, at her delivery company uniform draped over a chair, at the stack of bills on their coffee table. "Someone ordinary, someone who has to work 3 jobs just to pay rent, someone who doesn't belong in his world." Natalie set down her chopsticks and turned to face Victoria fully. "Victoria Sterling, I'm going to say this once, and I want you to listen carefully. You are not ordinary. You're intelligent, compassionate, hardworking, and beautiful inside and out. Any man would be lucky to have you, billionaire or otherwise." "But Jonathan was right," Victoria protested. "I'm just another charity case." "Jonathan Wells is a bitter man who is trying to hurt both you and Sebastian," Natalie countered. "Did it ever occur to you that maybe Sebastian's previous relationships ended because those women weren't right for him, not because he got bored with helping them?" Victoria considered this for a moment, then shook her head. "It doesn't matter. Even if his feelings were real, we're too different. His mother was right about that. His mother is a snob who's probably never worked a day in her life," Natalie said flatly. "And if Sebastian lets his mother's opinion dictate his choices, then he's not the man you thought he was." That night, Victoria lay awake staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment she'd spent with Sebastian. Despite her anger and hurt, she couldn't forget the gentleness in his voice when he'd caught her in the hallway, the way his eyes had lit up when he talked about the community center, the sincerity in his expression when he'd told her he loved her. The grand gesture Victoria was delivering lunch to an office building downtown when she saw the crowd gathered outside Cross Industries. Camera crews, reporters, and curious onlookers filled the sidewalk, all focused on something happening inside the gleaming lobby, despite her better judgment. Victoria parked her bike and pushed through the crowd until she could see what was causing the commotion. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see Sebastian standing at a podium that had been set up in the center of the lobby, speaking to a room full of reporters and business associates. "Can't hear anything from out here," complained a woman standing next to Victoria. But apparently the heir to Cross Industries is making some kind of major announcement. Victoria's heart pounded as she watched Sebastian, noting the tension in his shoulders and the serious expression on his handsome face. Whatever he was announcing, it was clearly important. Acting on impulse, Victoria pushed through the revolving door and into the lobby. Security guards were stationed around the perimeter. They seemed focused on keeping the reporters contained rather than keeping people out. ... Which is why I'm announcing today that I'm stepping down as CEO of Cross Industries, Sebastian was saying, his voice carrying clearly through the lobby's excellent acoustics. A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd of reporters. Victoria felt her own surprise like a physical blow. Stepping down? "I'll be transitioning to a new role as director of Cross Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to community development and education initiatives," Sebastian continued. "Our first project will be a comprehensive community center in the Riverside District offering literacy programs, job training, and support services for families in need." Victoria's breath caught as she realized he was talking about the building he'd shown her, the project he'd wanted her to help him run. "I know this comes as a surprise to many of you," Sebastian went on. "But I've realized that true success isn't measured in profit margins or stock prices. It's measured in the positive impact we have on other people's lives." A reporter called out a question about the financial implications of his decision, but Victoria didn't hear Sebastian's response. She was focused on scanning the crowd, looking for the face she both hoped and dreaded to see. She found Jonathan Wells standing near the back of the group, his expression thunderous. When his eyes met hers across the crowded lobby, his mouth curved into a cold smile that made Victoria's skin crawl. "Quite a speech, isn't it?" Jonathan said, appearing beside her with the silent movement of a predator. "Though I have to wonder if he would be making such noble sacrifices if a certain delivery girl hadn't broken his heart." Victoria turned to face him, drawing on every ounce of courage she possessed. "What do you want, Mr. Wells?" "Nothing from you, my dear. I've already gotten everything I wanted." His smile widened. Sebastian's resignation clears the way for my own acquisition plans. By the time he realizes what he's given up, it will be too late to get it back. Victoria felt sick as understanding dawned. You orchestrated this. You told me about his past relationships to drive us apart because you knew it would hurt him. Guilty as charged, Jonathan replied without a hint of remorse. Though to be fair, I didn't have to lie about anything. Sebastian does have a history of playing white knight to women in distress, but he never loved any of them, Victoria said, the truth crystallizing in her mind even as she spoke. That's what made me different, isn't it? He actually fell in love with me and you couldn't stand it. Jonathan's smile faltered slightly. Love is a luxury that men like Sebastian can't afford. He'll learn that eventually. Victoria looked back toward the podium, where Sebastian was fielding questions from increasingly aggressive reporters. He looked tired and stressed, but there was also something else in his expression, kind of peace, as if he was finally doing something that felt right to him. You're wrong, she told Jonathan, her voice growing stronger. Love isn't a luxury. It's the only thing that makes any of this worth it. The reunion. Victoria waited until the press conference was over and the reporters had dispersed before approaching Sebastian. He was standing alone by the lobby's central fountain, his head bowed as he stared into the swirling water. That was quite a speech, she said softly. Sebastian's head snapped up, his green eyes widening with surprise and something that looked like hope. Victoria, I didn't think. I wasn't sure you'd come. I happened to be in the neighborhood, she replied, trying to keep her tone light despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. Delivering lunch to someone who actually appreciates Thai food. Sebastian's mouth curved in the beginning of a smile. I deserved that. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the space between them feeling like an ocean despite the fact that they were only a few feet apart. Sebastian, Victoria, began, then stopped, not sure how to put her feelings into words. Victoria, I need you to know that Jonathan was telling the truth about my past relationships, Sebastian said, his words coming out in a rush. I did help those women, and yes, I dated some of them. But he was wrong about my motivations. Victoria studied his face, seeing the vulnerability there that she'd fallen in love with. Tell me about them. Sebastian ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect styling. Rachel was an actress who was being stalked by an ex-boyfriend. I helped her get security and legal protection. We dated for a few months, but we both realized we were better as friends. Victoria nodded, encouraging him to continue. Ami was a single mother who was about to lose her apartment. I helped her find stable housing and a better job. We went out a few times, but there was no real connection beyond friendship. And the artist? Sophia had incredible talent but no business. Since I funded her gallery showing and helped her connect with people who could advance her career. We had dinner a few times, but again, it was more mentor and student than romance. Victoria absorbed this information, fitting it together with what she knew about Sebastian's character. So Jonathan was technically telling the truth, but he left out the most important part, which was that you genuinely cared about helping them, but you were never in love with any of them. Sebastian stepped closer, hope flickering in his green eyes. I have never been in love before you, Victoria. I thought I knew what it felt like, but I was wrong. What I feel for you is completely different from anything I've ever experienced. Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. I've been an idiot. No, you haven't. You had every right to question my motives, especially after what Jonathan told you. I should have been honest about my past from the beginning, Sebastian, Victoria said, reaching out to touch his arm. I love you too. I was scared and hurt, and I let that cloud my judgment. But watching you give up everything for your principles just now, I realized that the man I fell in love with would never manipulate someone's feelings. Sebastian's smile was radiant. As he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made the busy lobby around them fade into irrelevance, when they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and grinning like teenagers. So, Victoria said, still wrapped in his embrace, about that job offer, ... Sebastian's laugh was rich and warm. "'Kay. The position is still open if you're interested." "I'm very interested," Victoria replied, then grew serious. "But Sebastian, are you sure about giving up the company? That's your entire life's work." Sebastian cupped her face gently, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "My life's work is just beginning. I can't think of anyone I'd rather build it with than you." Victoria felt her heart swell with love and possibility. Then let's build something amazing together. As Sebastian kissed her again, surrounded by the soaring architecture of the building where they'd first met, Victoria realized that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most unexpected collisions. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, falling into love turns out to be the best accident of your life. Epilogue, 1 year. Later, the Riverside Community Center buzzed with activity on its official opening day. Children's laughter echoed from the reading corner where volunteers helped with homework. Adults clustered around computer stations learning new skills. The smell of fresh coffee and homemade cookies drifted from the cafe area that Victoria had insisted on including. Victoria stood in the center of it all, wearing jeans and a cross-foundation t-shirt. Her hair pulled back in a ponytail as she coordinated the various activities happening throughout the building. She looked completely in her element, Sebastian thought, as he watched her from across the room. Proud of your handiwork? James Patterson appeared beside Sebastian, also wearing foundation gear and looking slightly overwhelmed by the controlled chaos around them. Proud of her, Sebastian corrected, nodding toward Victoria. I just provided the building and the funding. She made it come alive. James followed his gaze to where Victoria was kneeling beside a little girl who was struggling, with a picture book patiently sounding out words and celebrating each small victory with genuine enthusiasm. She's good at this, James observed. She's extraordinary at this, Sebastian replied, and at everything else. James raised an eyebrow at the obvious adoration in his friend's voice. So when are you going to ask her to marry you? Sebastian's hand moved unconsciously to his jacket pocket, where a small velvet box had been residing for the past 2 weeks. Soon? How soon? Before Sebastian could answer, Victoria looked up and caught sight of him across the room. Her face lit up with the smile that never failed to make his heart race, and she waved him over. Right now seems like perfect timing, Sebastian said to James, then walked across the room toward the woman who had changed his entire life. As he approached Victoria and the little girl she was helping, Sebastian realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not the empty success he'd chased for years, but this meaningful work, genuine connection, and love that grew stronger every day. Victoria Sterling, he said, dropping to one knee beside her in front of the entire community center, will you marry me? The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted in cheers and applause as Victoria said yes through tears of joy. As Sebastian slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her surrounded by the people whose lives they were working to improve together, he knew that sometimes the best things in life really do begin with falling helplessly into love. The end.